If you work in special education, EBD programs, or any spaces with big feelings, co regulation is more than a buzzword, it's infrastructure. Today, licensed clinical counselor Jonathan Barberio and I explore how adult nervous systems shape student behavior, what co regulation looks like in real time, and how to build tiny co regulation routines into your day. You'll get concrete ideas to stay grounded with your students, even if your role is bouncing from escalation to escalation.
Welcome to Little Bits of TLC, the podcast for school-based leaders, practitioners, and specialists supporting students with complex academic, behavioral, social, emotional, and mental health needs. Join our host, Heather Volcho, as each episode brings together behavioral science, system thinking, and real school experience to explore student behavior, special education, classroom strategies, educator well-being, and sustainable systems that help students and staff thrive. Whether you're in the classroom, supporting students behind the scenes, or leading change across your school or district, our goal is to provide practical, research-informed ideas that you can put into practice right away. This is Little Bits of TLC.
This week, I've got John Barberio with me, and I'm excited for this conversation because co regulation is something that can completely undermine education or help folks show up in ways that you have kind of like those unimaginable outcomes just by the presence in the room. So, John, for you, when you're thinking about co regulation, you're coming at this from more of that clinical counselor perspective. Can you share with me what this means for you?
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of where my mind goes. But it's also something as I talk to a lot of my younger clients that, if possible, I like to be able to talk to some of the teachers because it's something that can be so powerful. I think we forget that, especially for younger students, they are borrowing our nervous systems. They will respond how we respond. I mean, I know it's not always as straightforward as we like. If we're calm, they'll be calm, isn't exactly the math. But if we're stressed, they'll be stressed, is definitely the math. And so, yeah, for me, it's more about just paying attention to our bodies so that we're not reacting to other people.
I love how you frame that, though. They're borrowing our nervous system. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I borrowed that from Bruce Perry, but yeah, I say this, I feel like every week, but we have a sixth sense, which is our nervous system, which we can't access, but we know when it's not okay. And we usually know when it's not okay when we start to feel stressed or we start to talk quicker or we see the effects of it. And so yeah, especially for kids who don't have the ability to regulate, to notice their bodies as much, they're just going off of their environment. And so that's great news, but it's also hard news, right? Because the good news is that we do have some degree of control over our space. But the bad news is that if we're off, we're going to see that in other ones.
Gosh, so then how do we show up in a way where we can both make this happen simultaneously, right? Like we're both in the same
Yeah.
space. We may be experiencing the same or similar things, but in my experience, rarely are we actually experiencing it the same way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's something that I've been noticing more and more that I've been talking with clients, and I just said it, it's the word noticing.
Hmm.
I think that's the hardest part is to just notice where we are at personally. In today's world, it's so easy to, if we're feeling like I got my coffee here with me this morning, maybe if I just taken some time to say, okay, what am I actually feeling right now? Or we'll run to energy drinks or our phones, or we so easily try to regulate ourselves with external things. But I think when we're just able to say, where am I at right now? Especially for a teacher walking into a classroom, just to take, I don't think it has to be more than 30 seconds of just like, all right, where am I at right now? And just accept that. Like, all right, I'm a little, this isn't going to be, I'm not Mary Poppins today, or just being able to notice, okay, this is where I'm going to be at today. So if students are acting a certain way, it might be because of me. But yeah, it's just being able to actually notice where we are. We don't do a very good job of that. And I mean, me too. I'm not saying it to other people like that. I definitely struggle with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a choice, right? It's a
Mm,
choice to put my mind in that space for that
right.
purpose. I mean, for me, working in secondary, I had to take attendance every 45 minutes. Who's in my room, who's not, who's where, right? And so that was always for me while I'm scanning around the room and marking, bodies and seats was my time to be like, okay, how did last period go? How am I showing up right now? And that was always my internal like moment because
Mm,
it's a rote task. It's not something that's taking a lot of cognitive lift for me, and it is sort of like a given, like the students know that I'm not engaging because I'm trying to make sure that I don't miss anybody.
mm,
So it was kind of just this natural moment where I could do the rote task and kind of have that personal check in with myself. And I've always worked in social, emotional, behavioral, mental health, challenging
right.
spaces. And so that was always a time for me, like if I came in off of a rough meeting or, there was an incident at the end of the last class period that then like just cleared and I'm still coming down from, I would own that. But I think for
Mm.
me, that was like over years having practice to say, "Hey guys, just want to let you know I'm a little off right now. If I'm a little bit more direct than I usually am, I'm sorry. It's not you. Please let me know if I'm coming at you in a kind of way that you don't like."
Oh, I love that.
Right, and just, like, put some words around that and then be like, "Alright, let's get to math." Right? Because,
Yeah.
like, we've got stuff we've gotta do, but we're also humans in this room too.
Yeah, I love you touched on that of just naming it. I think that's so important. One thing, especially when I do like parent coaching and working with families, is I think I've said this just last Friday of if you're not okay, don't tell. Teens can kind of know you're lying, but especially middle school or elementary school
Mhm.
age kids, if you're telling them that you are okay when you're not, you're telling them that what they're feeling and experiencing right now isn't true. And they don't
Yep.
conceptualize that in a way of like, something feels off here. But their
Mhm.
bodies do, and they will react to it. And I think for teens, we lose their respect. Like it's like, hey, I'm judging something's off here. You're saying nothing's wrong. My body's telling me something's wrong. So yeah, I love that, Heather. Just being able to say it and own it and be like, hey, I'm a little off today. I might be, whatever, and it kind of lets them know, like, oh, okay, she said she was a little stressed, or, Jonathan's having an off day today, so he might, might have a lighter session. But yeah, I think naming it's huge.
Well, so is that part of co-regulation?
I think for adults, more so, I think for kids, it is or younger ones, I should say, it's our responsibility to kind of take charge. And I need to find a better word for co-regulate because really, they are all, they are dysregulated most of the time because they're learning and they're growing. They have more hormones they can fit in their body. But yeah, I think especially for older ones, especially one-on-one times, like just be able to, hey,
Mm.
I see you're having a hard time paying attention today. You feeling a little wiggly, or what are you feeling? And just calling attention to it. I think that's huge. And doing it in a way of just connection before corrections, my big thing, eye level, and just be like, hey, I'm sensing this. What are you experiencing? And that again just brings it up like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I am a little stressed. They probably can't tell you why,
Mhm.
but even just teaching them to notice their body is going to be huge for later on in life.
Well, so let's walk through some of these ideas, right? So, what does
Hmm.
co-regulation actually look like? I'm thinking very practical, right? So, I could be maybe at home with my kids, or I could be in a classroom, I could be in a hallway, right? It might be a structured situation with, just a couple of, students, or it could be, these massive environments that we all find
Yeah.
ourselves in, right? Walk me through, like, so what are some of these examples of co-regulation in these spaces?
I think it's going to be different for different age groups in classrooms for sure. I think so for the littler kids, I'm thinking just create a space just for wiggles, just to say, hey, y'all are, you know, y'all are young, you have a lot of energy, you're being asked to sit still for far too long.
Yeah.
And let's just get the wiggles out. But again, like teaching, this is the context where we do this, and then we're going to do this.
Mm.
And sometimes I know teachers, so many things we want to get through a day. And if the whole class just isn't about it, we got to pivot because you're going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to drive them crazy. And just being able to say, all right, let's just get up, stand up, walk around a little bit. And again, just kind of saying like, okay, I feel like the class is a little excited. Are y'all excited? And just getting a
Mhm.
name to it. I think one on one, I know it's hard when you're trying to manage a classroom, but I think just that 10 seconds just to come to a student and say, hey, I feel like we're struggling a little bit right now. Can you tell me what's going on? I don't know what all the different schools do. I'm huge on quiet fidgets. I'm big on being able to stand up and walk around when you want. I'm big on having just a little space in the room where kids can go, even if it's just a small little. I've seen one classroom that's just a little chair where they can turn away and put a headphone on, but just any way that they can notice and do something about it and not just sit and do math. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that you're saying that like it is going to be different age group, like age range to age range, or different types of settings are going to have different strategies. But I think what's interesting to me is that the examples that you're listing off for co-regulation, it's not actually a shared experience necessarily.
Hmm.
It's as an adult providing the space or the tools or the opportunity to engage in maybe even more self-regulatory activities, which is really
Yeah.
interesting to me because I've always heard of co-regulation being a shared experience. Like, how am I
Hmm.
leveraging where I am at to help you figure out and level where you are at? And I really appreciate that you can just be like, hey, I'm noticing. You want to do something about that?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
because I'm already having to be in a certain kind of space to be able to kind of put words to it or show up in that kind of a way, or even propel my students to want to engage in any of those potentially self-regulatory options that I've got around them.
yeah. I love that observation because, you know, family systems theory says that we essentially get our nervous system from our family. And
Mm,
we prefer known discomfort to unknown freedom. So even if our family environment is chaotic, it's familiar. And this can we can go down a dark path here when we talk about, a lot of trauma, but that's not what this is about. But to your point, we may see calm, but that may actually be disassociation.
mm,
We may see like high stress level, and that may actually be a fight or flight response because maybe this student has a high perfectionistic tendencies, and the topic that we're going over today is a little above their what they understand, and so their body's actually saying, "Oh, I'm actually not safe." And
yeah.
so, yeah, that's a great point to see. Like, oh, you're just a little stressed out. I've been stressed too. It's like, well, maybe not. And
Mm,
one thing that I think is I'm learning is so complex about us humans is everybody kind of speaks a different language with our nervous system, even the words we use, right? Like I'm from the South. Bless your heart's not something you want to say to somebody unless you're friends with them. Um, and so, yeah, that's a great point, Heather. Just being able to say, like, hey, maybe your experience looks similar to mine, but maybe it's not the exact same. And that's why I think naming it can be so powerful. Understandably hard to take time to do sometimes in a classroom.
well, so let's go there, right? I mean, in behavior analysis, we would refer to this as learning history, right?
Mm,
So then,
okay.
how do nervous systems and learning histories show up? I mean, you just kind of gave a couple of small, like, quick examples, but I do truly believe they're really linked. That
Mm,
I don't know. I don't think you can have a learning history that isn't showing up in your nervous system somehow.
yeah. Yeah.
Can you put some more words around that?
I mean, to get super practical, I love just little scales of 1 to 10, even to have on a desk and different people I work with like to call it different things: emotional capacity, love tank, focus tank. And as much as it helps, I think teachers to see, like, what if we had a classroom where you look out across the desks? This is probably for younger ones. And you can actually see where each student is, so you can see the ones that are at 10, like I'm showing up today. And you can see the ones that are on the lower end and I'm struggling. That's good for a teacher. I think it's huge for students just to be able to say and see, like, okay, I'm here, which again goes back to that noticing about where am I at right now? Because kids will just say, I'm bored, right? When they're actually hungry. Or even
Yeah.
the temperature of a classroom for a student with ADHD can have a big effect on their ability to sit still, sleep. There's all
Mhm.
these other factors. And I think just getting that students to realize, like, okay, I'm actually tired. That's what's going on right now. Yeah, again, just bringing up that awareness.
Attention school leaders and educators. Do you have a student whose school day has become a cycle of crisis, office referrals, missed instruction, and starting over? Maybe your team has tried intervention after intervention, yet it still feels like everyone is working incredibly hard without making the progress the student deserves. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. That's exactly why we created the Lab. The Lab from TLC is an intensive learning program designed for students with complex academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs that doesn't pull them away from their school community. We work alongside students where they are, helping them rebuild the skills, confidence, and supports that they need to be successful right where they're learning every day. What makes the Lab different is that we don't just support the student. We partner with educators, families, and community providers to create a shared plan, provide ongoing coaching, and build the local capacity needed to continue supporting the student long after our direct services have ended. If you're facing a complex student situation and wondering what comes next, we'd love to start the conversation. Email us at lab@tlcnonprofit.co or learn more by visiting tlcnonprofit.co/thelab. That's tlcnonprofit.co/thelab. Because when students are struggling, they deserve more than another temporary solution, and people supporting them deserve more than hoping things get better. Rebuilding skills, confidence, and hope. The Lab at TLC. Working in a self-contained, alternative education, therapeutic, or correctional classroom? Project Onward is a 6-strand cohort-based project designed to help you build a strong, structured program for complex students who need extra specialized support. You'll get practical tools to set up clear routines, strengthen engagement, manage behavior, and plan instruction that actually fits the splintered needs of your students. By the end, you'll walk away with a complete, ready-to-use program that has been adapted to your local needs. Led by Heather Bolchko, Lathrell Eisler, Jonathan Barbario, and Manny Wasias, Project Onward blends proven strategies with vetted experience, helping you move forward with confidence. If you're creating something from the ground up or looking to update what you've got, this project gives you the structure and clarity to do it well. If you support students with low incident needs, Project Base helps you design a consistent classroom built just for them. And if you're working in general ed or resource settings with behavioral challenges, Project Thrive gives you the tools to work with, not against, the flow of your classroom. Visit university.thresholdlearning.org to meet the team and get started today. Let's move onward together.
So, if we're looking at bringing that kind of right now awareness in to whatever space it is that we're sharing, some of that is, I think, as you were just saying, coming from whatever their experiences really in life have been to date, that they are
Mm,
interpreting their right now through the lens of whatever their life has given them. Can
yeah.
you walk me through, like, what is that nervous system experience when we're trying to co-regulate, but the right now is actually just a little microscopic moment of the entire, life they've had to date?
My mind's going so many different places right now, and I think part of it, my head goes clinical of, let's get a history, let's get an
Hmm.
understanding of all of these things, but
Of course.
the teacher doesn't have that, right? Like you
Yeah,
have who's
not
in front of you,
necessarily.
you have who's in front of you right now today. And so, yeah, considering that the past is a lens through which we view the present, I think for someone trying to manage 15, 20, 30 students in a classroom, I think just having that awareness that what you're seeing isn't necessarily a reaction to what's happening right now.
Mm,
It's a it is a reaction to the right now, but it has been informed by a past that, apart from a massive psychological evaluation, you're never going to know. But
mhm,
I think just knowing that, because I work with people who is like, hey, we've done all the stuff, the things. Why are we not doing this?
mm,
And for me, it helps me be a better clinician when I know, like, okay, I'm only seeing a snippet. There is a history here that I'm not aware of. And I think even just having that consideration in mind helps me be a little bit more gracious, be a little bit more kinder, understand that I might be seeing a reaction and not a response yet. I always like to say yet, this isn't definitive. So just having that understanding that there's a lot that I'm not seeing right now, and I never will. And I can deal with what's in front of me.
Well, I think that's true for me too, though, because a number of times that one of my students would be coming at me pretty hot, it was so
Mm,
grounding for me to recognize this might have something to do with me, but it may not.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just giving myself that space to say, if it's mine, I will own it. Like that's always been true for me. If I've done something or if I, came across in a certain kind of way that that this is, the response that I'm getting, then let's walk through that and
Mm,
let's figure out how that's making sense on both of our sides.
mm,
But if you're just coming at me hot because there's something else going on and, that I'm just kind of aware that is coming out, well, then I don't need to be defensive. I don't need to be,
mm,
thinking through all of the things that I did that how did I get, no, it's not me. Right. I'm just in that situation. So holding that space to say, like, hey, this is just a response or reaction to something.
mm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is yet, but I'm here to kind of be curious and learn and figure that out. Put me in a completely different headspace
Yeah.
than if I were to just see them coming at me. Like it's just a very different interaction.
Yeah. That's so good. And I'm even thinking of times where I don't know if you said the word, but taking it personal.
Mm.
Even in my practice, sometimes, like I just mentioned, like, hey, we've done all the work. Why are you not doing the thing? What do you hate about me? It's
Yeah.
like your class is dysregulated because you're a bad teacher. It's, especially
Mhm.
for teens who can use some words to really do some damage. It's not personal. And I think just knowing that, like, you're not mad at me. This is not actually what's going on right now. This is a history.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, to your point, if you do feel like, hey, I'm doing all the right things and you're not, it becomes a personal thing. So now we start reacting out of a personal place of hurt, which then goes back to what we said from the very beginning of just being able to notice that, like, all right, I'm getting a little elevated right now. I'm going to choose to bring it down. Maybe they won't, but I can own my space.
Yeah. I mean, in those moments, I've definitely worked with some students where they have spouted off, and then I'll just
Yeah.
be like, okay, do you feel better now? Right. And that just, wait, what? Right. Like there's just this reaction of like, wait, I just read you the riot act. And your first question is, do you feel better now? Right.
Because they're
Because,
trying to dysregulate you, right?
right.
Like
I mean,
they are
like,
not okay and they want you to not be okay. Because it's not, we all know, we've all been, Like exactly to your point, we've all been dysregulated. Another person will just be like, "You cool?" And nothing feels worse than that, right? If they're like, "No,
Yeah.
I guess I'm not actually." So
Right.
I love that you said that, Heather. Just kind of calling that out, like,
Well, I mean, like, sometimes too, it's like that you get that kind of, wait, what? That's not the reaction I was expecting, which
mm,
then opens up this opportunity. Because typically my follow back to that was, what's actually going on here?
mm, yeah,
Right. Because
yeah,
if there's some legitimate point of feedback in this interaction that I need to receive, I'm game. Let's go. Right. But if this is something else going on, if there's another way that I can connect you to supports that you might need, game on. Right. But like
yeah,
whatever this is may or may not be what it actually is. So here's the opportunity.
yeah. Oh, I love
Right. And
that.
just kind of like opening that. And sometimes they take it, sometimes they wouldn't. That was fine. Right, but it was just one of those, like, we're not gonna let this escalation train just run rampant, and if you
Mm.
do need something out of this, we can make that connection for you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I don't know why I thought of it now, but I don't think this is a conversation we'd be having 20 years ago, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
I think I don't want to sound like a old curmudgeon, but the regulatory abilities of classrooms today are very different from before. And I
Mm,
think a lot of teachers who want to be educators have now find themselves in a space where they're being more, I don't want to overuse the word regulators, but they're more having to get into kind of what you were just talking about, kind of like the nuances of like, well, what's really happening here? Where, we'd like to be able to go to a class, sit down, impart information, and lead future generations. But that's just not the world we're living in right now. And I don't know if that's helpful for some teachers to hear, if like your experience is normal and acceptable, but also probably not what a lot of people signed up for. It's definitely something I can see is getting a little more difficult in newer generations. But I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, right, that we're having right now, rather than just saying, well, back in my day, I had to sit through school for 8 hours. Well, times are different.
yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, this is a bit stereotypical on my part. Typically, in the younger grades, there's sort of like this curating young minds and the love of learning, right? And like, yes, there are specific things they need to get learned at different grade levels, right? Like,
Yeah.
not overlooking that at all. But typically, as an educator, I'm showing up to help students learn. Whereas
Hmm.
sometimes in secondary, by the time you're hitting middle school, high school, now you're starting to get into more like content experts. And so
Hmm.
I have found a shift from at the elementary levels, teachers maybe kind of just sort of knowing that students are going to be a little off. Like this just sort of comes with the
Hmm.
territory. And that's part of what I'm here for because them learning themselves is part of them learning all of this academic stuff that I need to get them to
Hmm.
learn as well. But by the time I get into secondary, then it's like, but I love social studies, right? And I just really
Hmm.
want like world history or whatever that topic is that like I'm nerding out on. Like I want my students to nerd out on that with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes like all this regulation stuff just gets in the way of like the cool stuff that
Mm.
we're actually here to do, right? If you're running a science lab or having this like amazing literary, dialogue where you're like, wrestling with hard thoughts, right? Like all of these things, you find kind of that academic draw as an educator that sometimes the kind of the human experience, just that normal, where like you're a human, I'm a human, we're in this space together,
Mm.
can sometimes be a little bit more overlooked in secondary spaces than it
Yeah.
is in elementary. So I'm wondering as you're listening to me kind of talk through how these different educators are potentially showing up in these different spaces, how do they keep themselves regulated? I mean, I'm coming at it from a secondary perspective. I know you're definitely drawn into, some of the younger populations. So like we're as adults showing up dysregulated,
Mm.
but we're also still responsible for
Yeah.
running that space,
Yes.
engaging in that interaction appropriately. Like, how do we keep ourselves regulated so that we can actually co regulate with those around us?
Yeah. That's a hard question for me to answer generally. And maybe that's just because I'm used to dealing with, specific people. But to try to tackle it from a general viewpoint, I'll start with kind of something I touched on earlier is I think we outsource regulation a lot. Says the guy over here through a cup of coffee by the time this is done, right? Or even, I'll give an example of something that I learned from me is after work, big podcaster, audiobook guy. I'll First thing I do is before I even pull out of my parking spot is put on an audiobook, go home, and I'm not even aware of what I'm bringing home, right? Like
Mm.
I didn't take any time. I just literally went straight from the office or maybe the most practical step would be to ask the question of yourself: in what ways do I outsource my nervous system? In what ways do I use other things to calm me? And some of those things are going to be healthy, right? Like, we harp on diet and exercise or like just eating healthy and exercising like that. I hate to admit it, but I tell so many clients, if you just do that, you won't need me, right? But just even something as practical as a little bit of movement, even just a 5-minute walk where we just really take time to be like, where am I at right now? One thing I actually do this, hopefully this isn't completely derailing us, but I'll ask some clients to go take a walk outside and I'll just sit and I'll watch and I'll be like, why'd you walk so fast? What are you trying to get here?
Mm.
And just be like, I don't know, I'm stressed. I'm like, well, you wouldn't have noticed that if we didn't even move. And so, yeah, I think really just paying attention to the ways that, how do I regulate? Do I even try to? And I think I want to put in a little caveat here. It's hard to go from a 9 to a 2. I think, and I think we just need to understand that and just being kind to yourself about that, owning where you are, not trying to force it. But that was a very long-winded way of saying it just starts by noticing, which starts by giving time for that. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes a simple deep breath.
Well, so before we started recording, I know the example may feel a little bit extreme depending on where different educators are showing up, like which community spaces they're working in.
Mm,
But you were talking about for folks with addictions,
mm,
outsourcing that
mm-hmm,
to other activities, other substances, those kinds of things, and the work. Like that's a lift to
mm,
then choose to go through like me cognitively processing dysregulation as opposed to legitimately outsourcing. Like that's the most like
mm-hmm.
clearest example of outsourcing that,
Yeah.
regulation to something that is not me. I think of anything that we've talked about in this episode. But I think it's also really relevant because as adults, I think we have our own ways of outsourcing it. It may be to our own addictions and other, other ways of coping. But there are lots
Yeah.
of ways, I think, in adulthood that if I don't know, maybe seem more socially appropriate in certain ages or certain social
Yeah.
circles, right? But it's still the same. Like we're just legitimately outsourcing that regulation so that we're not even learning or practicing that ourselves. And now we're turning around and try to help our students do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And DBT is becoming really popular today, dialectical behavioral therapy. And really a lot of what it is mindfulness. I mean, to oversimplify it, which really just comes down to just being aware. And I can't think of a single client that I've worked with where we don't do some sort of somatic intervention that really is just slowing down. I
Mm.
think that's touching on something why I think it is hard to regulate ourselves is because it takes a little bit of time. It doesn't take a ton of time. I'm not telling people to go for an hour run or to go completely like a vegan diet. I think just little ways, like, for me, just taking that 15-minute drive home of just not listening to anything, just taking some time to see how I'm feeling. It may be boring, but yeah, just taking that little bit of time just to notice and figure out, hey, how can I actually affect myself right now, this space?
That feels so much more doable. I think I've been in a lot of trainings and a lot of spaces
Mm,
where we're talking about co-regulation and they're like, okay, take X deep breaths and, count this way or, touch your fingers together or like all of these different, tactics and strategies.
yeah,
And like,
yeah,
right. Yes to all of these things, but I also appreciate how you're just saying like, just pause, right? Just
yeah,
pause and notice. And whatever shows up in that for you, great. Like follow that and be aware of that because then you can actually start making choices from it. But it's not this like a magic checklist of here's all these regulatory activities or here's the things that you put in
mm,
your calming corners or here's the posters that you need or here's the, like it's not necessarily that. Like those can be supportive and helpful, but it all
mm,
comes from can you just pause and notice?
yeah. I'm gonna share a testimony. I listened to a podcast. It was somebody who was talking about trying to take a 5-minute walk every 30 minutes. But I have been, between every session when I have time, trying to take a simple walk from the front of my office outside to the back. I try to make it take 5 minutes. I can do it in two, but there's something that's been really helpful about deliberately just walking slower. I know that sounds crazy,
Mm,
but just taking that time to be like, no, I want to go do more work. I want to get my notes done. I want to get those articles done. I want to do all those things. And when I'm done with those things, I'm going to have more of those to do.
mm,
And so for me, this has probably been going on for a month and a half now. So probably 4 times a day, six if I'm good about it. I will walk from my office to the back outside and come back and make sure it takes 5 minutes. And I have noticed that makes a huge difference for me, especially, you know, sessions later on in the day where I almost feel like I want to get through it quicker, but it's going to be 50 minutes one way or another. I've noticed I've been more I can sleep better, which is weird, but I promise you,
Hmm.
I notice I'm less anxious at the end of the day. I notice I talk slower at the end of the day. So literally maybe 20 minutes of walking a day in 4 little increments has been huge for me. And it really is just me giving myself the space to say, okay, where am I at right now? Because I could easily just get on my phone and scroll. I could easily just reply to emails. But for me personally, just even doing that has been huge. And I think at the end of the day, it really is going to come down to what each person does individually. You mentioned tapping fingers, or even, like I said, like a little fidget where you just immerse yourself in it. Yeah, I think it's really is just taking the time. And I don't think it would take people long to say, hey, what helps me check in, and just doing that thing.
Yeah, and I do. I appreciate that your examples are not these grand examples, right? That they are things that you can do while you're also doing other
Hmm.
things. I mean, listening to you talk about walking in a certain space at a certain time, like it made me realize that I was probably doing that in my classroom and I didn't even understand that that's what I was doing, because there was something very regulating about just making a couple passes around the classroom and picking up the
Hmm.
papers and the random pencils and all the random stuff that just landed everywhere by the end of last class period when one walks out and I got like 3 minutes as the next one is rolling in. I always viewed it as like me being able to kind of like reset the space, and then the next
Mm.
group always knew kind of what was coming in, but I don't think I fully recognized, like, for me, yeah, I was just getting up and moving, and that was also helpful. Granted, as a teacher, I'm very active, like
Yeah.
up and like walking around and checking in and moving, so like I was never a very sedentary teacher. But yeah, I think there's probably an aspect to, that was the moment where I could have random
Hmm.
conversations with students as they were going or coming, or different staff members would stop in and out, and it was just like a very, I don't know, I think it is sort of like a grounding experience to
Yeah.
reset, before I walk into, the next class period, the next topic, and for me, I was teaching different subjects too. So like,
Yeah.
completely, shifting my mind in those moments. I just never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and I know we're going down on time, but you just said something that I'm so happy you did, because I'm hearing the word is deliberate, and I think that's really
Mm,
important. Of doing something deliberate to own your space, to own what's happening in your world right now. It feels empowering. I know that
yeah.
may not be the best word that I want to use, but when there's so much going on, when there's so much chaos, when teachers are constantly around how many different human beings in a day and how many
Yep.
large groups, just to be able to even take a deliberate sip of coffee or of water and to just
Hmm.
say, like, hey, I'm going to just be calm right now and be present right now. And that goes back to just a lot of the mindfulness, a lot of the grounding. So yeah, it doesn't have to even be, me getting up and going out of my office. Good luck doing that as a teacher when you come back in. But
Right.
it could just be something like what you're saying, of like, hey, I'm just going to take a little walk around the classroom for me as much as for them, just to own my body, own my space. I think I love that you touched on that.
Well, thank you for making co-regulation not this big, scary clinical concept, but that it truly is just showing up, like sharing space, acknowledging what's
Mm,
going on for me, and then attempting to the best of our abilities outside of each other to maybe try to acknowledge what's going on in you too, or at least help you start to be able to do that for yourself. So thank you for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy you wanted to bring this up. This is something that I end up working through with clients most every day. So I'm happy we're having the discussion.
Jonathan is such an understated guy. He spends his days doing incredibly nuanced and emotional work supporting adults and families where addictions and trauma are their norm. Yet he translates that work beautifully into understanding educational spaces through the family units that are part of the classroom service that we are all engaging in around here. That's why I knew he was the right person to talk about co regulation, not as a soft add on, but as infrastructure that makes all other supports possible. It's not just a nice to have. It really is a need to have. And it actually is as simple as cognitively pausing and noticing, even when I'm running down the hall to respond to a crisis. So, if there's anything I can leave you with this week, it would be this co regulation anchor. I'm going to ask you to choose one moment tomorrow that you usually feel that stress spike. So maybe it's when you're walking in the building, maybe it's right after lunch, maybe it's being around that one student, right? Choose that one moment. Then plan a speedy personal check in. This could be just taking a full chest, full belly breath. It could be a statement that you repeat to yourself. It could be physically moving, a stretch. It could even be looking at some kind of a scale to, pick a number of where you were at. Whatever it is for you, some small, speedy personal check in. Then practice it. Don't talk about it. Just name it as, this is how I show up for me. Pick that one moment, figure out how you want to check in with yourself, and just let it be. Because co-regulating with all of those students and all of our, colleagues around us truly is as simple as cognitively pausing and noticing. So thank you so much for joining another episode of Little Bits of TLC, and we will see you next time.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider following @Threshold Learning TLC on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and Little Bits of TLC on TikTok, YouTube, and Threads. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider sharing the podcast with a colleague. Personal recommendations are one of the best ways to help other educators discover the show. You can find Little Bits of TLC on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss a new episode. You can also email us at podcast@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. For everything else, including our programs, resources, and professional learning opportunities, visit university.thresholdlearning.org. That's university.thresholdlearning.org. See you there.